I want to welcome everybody to the Friday afternoon Sex and Healing Relationship Interactive Codependence webinar, which is a mouthful. I'm Debbie McRae. I'm a licensed counselor in Mesa, Arizona, and I specialize in working with those partners who are experiencing relational betrayal trauma, and also in helping couples heal from those experiences as well. Today's topic, as always, is something that comes up as far as, a client coming into my office and what they're struggling with or what they're dealing with. It's my observations as to some of the more difficult parts of recovery for betrayed partners and even the addicts themselves. So today we're going to talk about empathy. I mean, we could just spend weeks and weeks and weeks on empathy, but today we're going to talk about what empathy is. We're going to talk about some of the things that get in the way. And so we're going to probably get through empathy blockers today. We're going to talk about why it's so difficult for an addict to show empathy. And then we're going to follow that up with, possibly in a second segment, on what are some of the ways, what are the empathy builders. So let's talk a little bit about empathy, because empathy is something that I feel is really the bridge for healing and rebuilding a relationship after betrayal. You cannot truly heal unless empathy is a part of that process. I saw this past week I look at life on a spectrum, and I had on one end of the spectrum the partner who's coming in and telling me that their addict partner is doing everything they possibly can to help them in their healing. They're understanding them. They are trying to find the words to say to them, to try to attune to them and figure out what their experience is. And when I am working with a partner like that, I see that there's less struggle versus the other partner at the other end of the spectrum, where there is a lack of empathy, and instead denial and shame just keep pushing through. So that's the partner that's going to come into my office week after week, struggling with emotional regulation, even though we've worked really hard and we've gotten them to a place where their window of tolerance is wider and they've gotten through the crisis period. They're still coming into my office very, very upset because they feel very misunderstood. They'll come in saying they feel unsafe. They're fearful about the relationship, and they're very discouraged regarding their future. So here's what I hear that type of a betrayed partner say. I just want him to understand. I just need him to feel what I'm feeling, right? And verbalize that to me. He just doesn't get it. Another one is, when I get triggered, my partner gets so defensive and he tells me I'm not doing my recovery, or he tells me I need to get over it. Another comment I hear is, it seems like every time I go to my addict partner and ask him, what can you do to create safety for me? He turns the tables and starts telling me all the ways I need to create safety for him. Another one is, I'll bring my concern to my addict partner, whatever it is. It could be for a variety of things, not only within that recovery realm, but even in life in general. And the addict partner gets very defensive and angry. So, like I said, what's missing with that second client is that element of empathy. So, what is empathy? So, empathy really describes a very wide range of emotions. When you look at empathy, there's kind of two aspects to empathy. And Brene Brown, one of the foremost shame researchers who also understands empathy on a very deep level, says that these two aspects of empathy are very, very important. So first of all, we have affective empathy, or affective. So what that means is that I have the ability to feel the emotions of another person. So I'm tuning into their feelings and maybe even the emotions that they're exhibiting in the moment with me. And then we have cognitive empathy. That means that I can take another person's perspective and I can identify with it. So in essence, I'm stepping into their shoes. The analogy I use with my clients is the telescope, and how everybody has different colored lenses in their telescope based on all the experiences we have throughout life. From the moment we're born, we have all of these different lenses that are put into our telescope. So when we are experiencing something, we see it a certain way based on past experiences, our judgments, our beliefs, and so on. So when I can have an experience with my addict partner, my betrayed partner, if I'm looking through my telescope, I see it totally different than if I'm willing to put mine down for a moment pick up my partner's telescope and look at the situation in the way they might be looking at it. Does not mean I have to agree with it. It just means I'm trying to understand it. So sometimes we confuse empathy with I've got to be on the same page with them, think like they do, believe like they do like they do. No, it's that I am in this moment trying to understand you by stepping into your shoes or looking through your telescope. Okay. It takes practice. It's a skill. It is not something that comes natural. Even I, as a therapist, at times, I kind of want to jump in and I have to take a breath and go, okay, wait, I have to look at it through their eyes. I've got to look at it through their lenses, try to understand. So it's kind of like a muscle. We have to practice it again and again and again and again. Otherwise, it doesn't stick with us. So it's not something we obtain and we always have it. We have to constantly work on it. We have to constantly be looking at somebody's point of view. And even at times when they're in pain, I have to sit in that discomfort and be vulnerable. And with empathy, I'm going to experience that pain with that person. And we're going to talk about what that would look like when we talk about empathy builders. The thing about empathy is empathy creates a space in a relationship where we can heal on a deeper level because we connect through emotions. That's how we do it. And so when we're in tune with each other or attuned, like we say, then all of a sudden I'm in this state of vulnerability because I'm sharing my deepest feelings. And in that moment, we experience connection. So the more we're vulnerable, the more we breed connection. And like I said, it increases the attunement within the relationship. So the next question is, why is empathy so important for relational repair? Well, like I said, it is a necessary component for rebuilding trust. It just has to be there. So that means that the addict partner has to gain this skill to show the betrayed partner that they are no longer that person they used to be, and that they are instead doing something different. They're in recovery. They are no longer sacrificing their betrayed partner because they're in their addiction. Also, it has to happen because empathy creates safety for the betrayed partner so that the betrayed partner can let the addict partner back in. So if the addict partner doesn't get defensive when the betrayed partner goes to him or her with something really hard to talk about, and they instead open their heart, open their mind, and are willing to sit in that place and listen to them, man, that creates safety in a way that I hear every betrayed partner say. The moment there's empathy, I feel I can move towards my addict partner. Empathy also demonstrates to the betrayed partner that the addict partner can understand and hold their pain. We all want to be understood. I hear that on repeat in my office. When we talk about relational attachment needs, that one always comes up. I just need you to understand. I need you to understand the why. I need you to understand the what in regards to me. And that's really important. These empathy skills are necessary for the addict partner, whether relationship works or not. It is just such an integral part of recovery. And so empathy helps if we are in relationship, the addict partner and the betrayed partner get in sync with each other regarding their feelings, their needs, their beliefs, and their best interests. So you can see why it's a really big component for rebuilding the relationship and rebuilding trust. So it goes both ways. I do want to make that and kind of give you a little bit of a thought on that. And that is, I'm not just talking here about the addict partner. So here's my side note, betrayed partners. You too have to get to a place in your recovery where you're willing to look at your addict differently. Oftentimes, I see the betrayed partners so deep in their pain and their hurt that they don't have empathy because they are victims to what their addict partner has done. However, in the healing process, if you're doing your recovery, what I see is a shift. And for me, empathy with the betrayed partner looks like I'm going to pull back the lenses from just this moment where I'm at, and I'm going to kind of try to understand my addict partner as a whole. So, what led them into the addiction, right? What has been the experience of the addict partner? What's the pain that they've been dealing with? What's their shame like? Why might they be going into denial? So I'm trying to see them in this place of, I like to call it being the compassionate observer. And I talked about this before. And that is, I'm going to step out of judgment in this moment. And I'm just going to look at this as if it's just a scene playing out in front of me. Without judgment, I'm just going to notice. I'm going to notice the patterns. I'm going to notice the behaviors. I'm going to see if there's any connections here. Maybe it's a connection to the past. Maybe it's a connection to last week. Maybe it's a pattern that you see over and over again. So when I step into that space of non-judgment and being a compassionate observer, I don't get triggered as a betrayed partner, not nearly as much. And it increases my window of tolerance so that if I do get dysregulated, I can get myself grounded very quickly. So it's a process as well for the betrayed partner. And we can get into that into more detail another time. So let's talk about why addicts really struggle with empathy. And so these are 6 empathy blockers. There's a lot more, but I just kind of pulled the ones that really stuck out to me as what I hear. So I want you to understand that in the early days of recovery, one of the biggest struggles that an addict partner has is they have to understand how their denial shows up. And denial shows up in many different forms. There's many different layers to it. So denial is I'm not fully accepting of the fact that I'm an addict and even what my addictive behaviors have done and caused me, as well as to my betrayed partner. And so there's a lot of denial there that they've got to break through. In that process, they're also dealing with shame. So you're going to hear that sometimes shame really gets in the way. And empathy comes after we understand denial, break through denial, understand our shame, work on healing our shame, and then we move into moments of empathy. And the more we work on having no denial, working on our shame, the longer we can stay in that space of empathy. So it's a process. It is a journey. It's not a destination. So there are times where your addict partner may have so much empathy, and then there's times that they just don't. And I want you to understand it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not in recovery. They could be struggling with recovery. They could just be having a bad week. You just don't know. But we're going to talk about how you can communicate about that. So the first blocker I see is blunted emotions. So remember, the reason that an addict gets into addiction is because they do not understand how to feel and deal with emotions. So they don't have a capacity for feeling emotions because they can't access them, right? I blocked them out. That's why I go into, my emotions are so big that I've learned to go into my addictive behaviors so I don't have to feel that. I don't have to go into that shame so deep. And I don't understand even what emotion I'm feeling and what this shame is doing inside my body. And so in that moment, because I can't feel, there's instant disconnection. And empathy just can't be there because when I'm in denial, when I am in my shame, when I'm in addictive behaviors, I'm not feeling emotions the same. So this gets really tricky for the betrayed partner because they feel emotion. They feel all the feelings. And so they want in that moment for that addict partner to get it, not recognizing the fact that part of the learning process in recovery for the addict is to understand their emotions, what they're feeling it, put a name to what's going on inside their body. Oftentimes, the only emotion they really recognize is anger. And they don't understand sadness. And they don't understand when they feel hurt or even when they're feeling like they're not good enough. And so oftentimes you will see addict partners almost have no emotion or only one emotion, which I talked about, which was anger. So it might be shutdown, it might be anger, okay? The second thing is there's resistance to giving up the addictive behaviors. I see this time and time again. So The addict doesn't think that they can give up whatever behaviors they're doing because it's helping them cope, right? It's helping them manage those emotions. It's helping them to numb out. It's protecting them from experiencing pain and fear and shame. And so in their mind, it's wired to believe that this is the way that I can actually deal with all of these really hard things in life. Now, oftentimes I will also see they might have sobriety in the areas of sex and porn, but the addict partner might move into things like, I see excessive gaming. They might move into gambling. I see them become workaholics. They might even get into exercise to an extreme. So I'm kind of moving back into my same behaviors, but yet I'm doing it in an addictive way. So we have to really recognize that even that in extreme is addictive. And there's a resistance because at that point in time, the addict doesn't understand that they have other skills and tools they can use and they've not developed them. So it's a process. So the betrayed partners that come in and their addict partners are slipping again and again and again and again, it's very difficult to ever experience any empathy with those addict partners because the addict partner is going back into their shame again and again and again every time they slip. Okay. The third blocker, not sharing their recovery struggles. So this is another big one. Addicts, they wage a fierce internal battle to stop the behaviors that they have been using for years, some of them for even decades. So what may happen is they may be struggling in certain aspects of their recovery work. They might be struggling in staying sober. I think of the porn addict, that they're kind of moving closer and closer to having a slip. And rather than going to their partner and sharing it, instead their shame keeps them isolated. They don't talk about it. They start to fear how their partner is going to react to them. The partner's going to get upset, so I don't dare tell my partner. The reality is that I'm finding with betrayed partners that the addict partner will go to them and say, I'm really struggling. That means the world to a betrayed partner because they feel like they're now being included in that recovery process, that they can help support the addict. And again, like I said, that when you're not sharing, you're isolating. So it's really important that even if you can't share with, the betrayed partner, that you're sharing with your sponsor, you're sharing with group members, that you're not going into that isolation. Okay. Number 4, having an attitude that recovery is a separate process. That means I, the addict partner, I have my path to travel. You, the betrayed partner, have your path to travel. And they're totally separate. Don't get on my path. So what happens is then the addict partner gets on their path of recovery, and that's all they focus on. So there's little energy, there's little internal emotional space that the addicts give to the betrayed partner, to the betrayed partner's feelings, to the reality of the betrayed partner, because they're so focused on their own work. And so the addict partner, oftentimes when they're doing this, really focuses on their own losses. I see them become more like a victim at times. Their struggles become more important than the betrayed partner's struggles. Their need for safety comes first before the betrayed partner's. And they don't have that attitude of, we need to stay connected in this process through empathy, so that we can help each other heal. That at times we can be there for each other to support each other in our recovery process. So sometimes that separateness isn't so good. One of the ways, and we'll talk about this too the next time we meet on empathy builders, and that is if the addict partner could just understand safety seeking and really understand the behaviors that a betrayed partner goes into because they're trying to seek safety, then it will help them kind of shift that attitude of, you need to go work on you, right? Because you're out of control and I'm just focusing on me. So we'll talk more about that next time. Number 5 blocker, and that is that the addict partner is not willing to work on their shame. They don't see it as shame. I'm perfectly fine. So in a way, they're protecting themselves from feeling their own shame by denying the fact that they have shame. So I guess we can have denial and shame coexisting together, right? And that's a pretty powerful set of emotions right there. So they're not willing to do the deeper work because it is really hard. Working on shame, I'm not going to, I never hold back with my clients. Working on shame is a difficult process. We have to work through some very hard memories, some very hard feelings. We have to work with our body on it, and it does take work. The addict partners that never get to that place of trying to understand their shame and get to the root of it, they're really not truly in recovery. And I see sometimes the addict partners going to therapists that just it's an easy process. I go to my therapist. We might just talk about, what are the self-care things you're doing? Have you had any slips? Anything you need to tell me? And that's about the extent of it. And so an addict normally is going to go, hey, I like going to that therapist because I leave there feeling really good, as opposed to the therapist that's going to really challenge me, right, and have me confront my shame. It's going to stir the pot. I'm going to feel emotions that I have to process. So there's going to be some work I have to do outside of my therapy session. I might have to turn to my group. I might have to turn to my sponsor to talk this through. And eventually, hopefully, they turn to their betrayed partner so that they can understand their shame on a deeper level. So not working on your own shame can really be one of those blockers, for the addict partner. The last one is this. 6, seeing themselves as the victim. Oftentimes, the addict partner likes to think about and reflect upon the pain that they're experiencing, because somehow having to recover from addiction is a lot harder than having to deal from betrayal trauma. And so when they are stuck in that place of being a victim, then they are expecting the betrayed partner to be the one who comes and rescues them. So I look at that as that the addict partner will kind of start to put boundaries on the betrayed partner, like, you need to talk to me a certain way, you need to ask it a certain way, you're being mean to me, and because you were mean to me, I had a slip. I know I can't come to you because if I do, you're going to overreact. They're going to say to things like, why aren't you just over this? I just can't believe it's taking you so long. Even look how well I'm doing, in a way, because they're feeling like, their addict partner needs to do better. And so because it's affecting them, it's making life difficult for them. And one of the tasks of recovery for the addict partner is they've got to step out of being a victim, because as long as we're a victim, we're in this place of helplessness, meaning I'm not going to step in, I'm not going to use my own power to actually work on my own recovery. And so when I see betrayed partners come in and they're dealing with somebody who's a victim all the time, it's really hard to guide and lead that person who's being a victim to a place of empathy. It's just impossible, because you're so inward focused. And it's, so kind of in this space. I tell my clients sometimes that addicts aren't necessarily narcissists. They'll come in and say that to me, and I go, well, no, but sometimes they do have some behaviors that are like that, because these addictive behaviors, like being a victim, feels similar to that. And so addict partners need to be so aware of when they get to that thinking that somehow it's worse for them than it is for the betrayed partner. The fact is, it's difficult for both. And it's difficult in different ways. And in some ways, it's similar. So anyway, next time we meet, we are going to talk about how to develop empathy. I don't want to rush through it today. So I'm going to encourage everybody to start asking a lot of questions. Does not have to be on the topic of empathy. It can be on any topic at all. But like I said, I've seen this happen, and I know many of you are wanting to know, okay, what's up next? So I'm going to give you a preview really quick so you know what we're going to talk about next time, because I would not want to be left hanging. Okay, we're going to talk about empathy builders. So here's the things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about educating yourself. We're going to talk about, let me look and see, how you do your own work to get to empathy. We're going to talk about developing an attitude of humility. So we step out of being a victim. We're going to talk about stopping the justifying and the minimizing. A next blocker is going to be, we're going to talk about stepping into perspective taking. The next one is staying out of judgment. We're going to talk about recognizing emotion. And the last one is we're going to talk about learning how to listen and communicate so that we get to the place of empathy. So I'm going to give you lots of skills and tools next time. And so I would encourage you that listen to this podcast or this webinar that, this is something that would be good for both the addict partner and the betrayed partner, both. It would even be one that even if you can't watch together, watch it separately, take notes, and maybe at a check-in, come together and share what stood out for you. Then stop at that point, go away, think about it, and come back and share some more, bringing back to that meeting, maybe some needs that you have that would help you feel like the other person has empathy for you. So maybe that's your homework for the next 2 weeks, is to kind of look through what we've talked about today, what stood out for you, sharing it with your partner. And then next time you come back, we're going to talk about all those 8 areas I just mentioned.
This is great. And you're right. This is a very challenging topic. And I hear often, I don't have empathy for my wife. I don't know how to do that. And so I think this is very practical, and I do look forward to the next session because, it feels really oblique and nebulous to an addict who's never, like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Like, what do you need me to do? It's almost that practical of like, what? Tell me how. Some of them are very willing, but just completely lack the skill. So this is really super helpful. When you were talking, I wrote down on number 5, not willing to do the work or share. And sometimes it's they're struggling and they don't tell, but you also said it in the I got this, and I feel like that with the not willing to share, like it'll be, I'm going to hold this back and I'm going to pretend. When I hear someone who, the day they had discovery and they've never had a slip, they've been perfect ever since. I don't believe it at all. And that everything's going great. Because I was like, okay, all of the reasons you were using that as a maladaptive coping mechanism, you do not magically flip a switch and then have all of the skills that you need and know how to use the tools. So that always feels like a really big red flag. I really love that you talked about the therapist. And when someone says, oh, he or she loves their therapist, and I always go, like, respect your therapist. You can like them on some level, but if they're not holding your feet to the fire on some, if there's not accountability, if they're not challenging you and you're just showing up and clocking the time and checking that off, nothing is really changing. And having somebody who's there with you to guide you and to kind of cheerlead, but also give you the tools that you need to step through this, and accountability. So next time when we meet, here's your homework, and then you're going to see the progress and you're going to feel the progress. And that's what I think is key. I regularly talk about how terrifying it is to consider this is massive change. This is like doing life completely different than the way you were doing it before, because using maladaptive coping mechanisms, escaping emotions, numbing out, to I'm going to be willing to feel uncomfortable, and I'm going to be willing to try something that's very foreign to me, and I might not do it right. You won't do it right, but I'm going to be willing to get some feedback and learn, because ultimately, what you get if you're willing to do the work is, the rewards are just amazing. Unfortunately, it's really scary, and so many people aren't willing. I really liked that you talked about empathy from the betrayed partner too. And it isn't like, because I hear this all the time, like you were talking about too, of like, the poor me's, from the addict. You need to know it, but it's just, like, if you are able to just take a step back and not take it personal, but understand that that's a very broken person. I always say, look at an 8-year-old kid, 7-year-old kid, and go, think about your person at that age, and is that going to be an intentional thing, as they grow up? But there was something that they didn't get when they were young, and I think having that ability to kind of look at it from a lens of, that's a very wounded child. It's not an excuse. They don't get to stay stuck there, but it helps, take the personalization out of it. I think that
Mhm.
can help just give you a little bit of a space. But yeah, I'm so excited about yeah, and I think for both of them, being a victim, I think that is helpless and hopeless. I mean, if you get stuck in a victim pattern on either side of the equation, you know you, everything is happening to you. You are disempowered. There is nothing you can do. It's always, life is going to happen to you, versus bad stuff has happened. I don't like this. I don't like these behaviors, but how can I find safety for myself? How can I move forward? That is, to me, empowering, that, I can do something different. It may not be completely successful, but I can keep trying. So anyway.
Something you said triggered a thought, and that is, you know, shame tells an addict that if I try this, I'm going to fail. If it goes wrong, I have failed. When we're in recovery, we've got to shift to a place of, I've tried it. It wasn't the best. So how can I do it different next time?
Yes.
And that's how we want to do recovery. That is normal. We are going to make mistakes. We don't learn unless we make a mistake. So our shame tells us, man, I can't do empathy with her. I'm just bad at it. I'm going to fail, or I can't have any empathy for him. Just try anything. So that's my last thought
Well,
on that.
yeah, and I honestly think the only real mistake is being unwilling to try. I mean, like everything else, life is life. It's messy. It's an experiment. None of us has, like, if I do this, then like everything's going to all line up. My life doesn't do that. Even with a program, even with a plan, even with support, even with all of that, stuff still happens. Best laid plans. So it's like, how do I navigate from here? Or like you said, this was somewhat better, but there's an opportunity. Okay, and I say this with couples all the time. It's the communication. Like, okay, that was better than we used to do, but is there an opportunity to do something a little different? Can we try something else? Okay, keep trying. And one size doesn't fit all. It's like, you can go, I always say, like, if you're triggered, have a half dozen, at least 3, but have several things that you can do that are your go-tos, because if one of them isn't working, the next one will, whatever. Or if one of them's calling someone and that person isn't available, guess what? You have a backup plan. But like, I have people that go, I listen to a podcast if I'm feeling triggered. Great. And that's 24/7. But for other people, it's like, I've got my friends to call. I've got, mindfulness exercise. I've got some ground, whatever you need, but have a couple of things. So, you have a plan, that you can go to. So that was a tangent thing. Sorry about that, everybody.
How do you
Okay.
really
All right. Let's go to the questions. So the first question, if your spouse acted out via emotional affairs without sex or pornography, is your trauma usually less than if it were sexual? I am seeking help for my chronic affairs, but I am truly surprised by how hurt my wife is over my last affair, which was more like an inappropriate friendship and no sex. I did 2 polygraphs to prove to her it wasn't sexual, but she insists that doesn't matter as much to her as the emotional parts and the lying. Can this be true? I don't think I'd be that upset if she'd done this to me, as long as she hadn't slept with someone else.
Okay. I'm going to tell you my experience on this, and that is that emotional affairs for a betrayed partner are very, very difficult, because when it's sex addiction, it's just sex. There's not that emotion attached to it, that feeling for another person. So even though you didn't have sex, if it was on that emotional level and there was that emotional connection, I find that betrayed partners really struggle with that. Because remember, as partners, that person is supposed to be the one who loves me the very most in this world. We have an agreement between ourselves, whether it's spoken or it's assumed that we are only there for each other, that it's just the two of us. No one else is allowed in this partnership. And so we are exchanging in very vulnerable moments those words that create emotional connection. And so I have oftentimes betrayed partners in disclosure will ask questions. Did you feel emotionally anything towards her or him? Did you love her or him? Did you tell her or him that you loved them? Did you share with him or her, certain aspects of your life where you were very vulnerable? And they might give examples. And it is a big struggle. I know on the outside, you might think, yeah, but sex is really big. Yes, it's true, it is. But that emotional aspect is just as painful and sometimes even more for the reasons that I just said. So, again, if you're dealing with a situation like this, you need to step into the shoes of your partner, who right now you might feel like, man, that's quite an overreaction. There's no sex. Even this last time, it was just an inappropriate friendship. Why is she reacting in such a big way? My recommendation is kind of step back a little bit, kind of look at it as that compassionate observer, step out of judgment, and just put yourself in her shoes for a moment and just think about what that would feel like if the tables were turned and you were dealing with something like that. And then maybe spend some time writing down some of your thoughts and your feelings of how that might feel for you if you were experiencing what your wife is. And then if your wife is open and willing to discussion, then I would sit down with her and I would probably share, I thought about what it was like to be in your shoes in this situation where this has happened and I've done this and I've done this and I've done this. And I just want to share with you what that would feel like for me. And I want to know if this has been your experience. Help me understand what this is like for you. That would be one of the first steps in creating empathy with her. Like you said, I don't think I'd be as upset if she'd done this to me as long as she hadn't slept with somebody. Yeah, that's probably compartmentalizing a little bit because it's easy to say that. And I understand why you would, because sex is very intimate, it's very personal. But for women, you've got to understand they feel a lot of emotion. One of the things I teach my clients is that men and women's brains are generally, and the majority of the time, wired differently. So men have the ability, and I do believe this is kind of a survival thing, right? It's a survival of the species thing. And that is that men have the ability to think of one thing at a time, right? So if all of a sudden a tiger's attacking them, they can stop and just think about fighting off the tiger. For a woman, it's more of, I feel more, my brain has more complex wiring because I have to multitask because I am nurturing in order to help civilization survive. My role has on an evolution basis been, I'm there to make sure everybody's needs are taken care of. And so I do that through a lot of feeling. So that's why I often see, bring it into today's time, you have addict partners that are more logical, right? And then I have betrayed partners that are more feeling, right? And I've got to get them to both kind of balance that. So I can understand why you might look at it and go, yeah, but logically, sex would make it even worse. However, my experience has been that for a woman or betrayed partners who have come in and there's been that emotional affair, it's just as painful and oftentimes even more painful. So I would recommend that you maybe try that exercise I tried, or even just go to her and simply say, what do you need me to understand about how you're feeling? Will you just write that down? And she can give it to you in a letter. She can sit down and share that with you, when you guys do a check-in. So just make sure that you create some nice, safe space around that check-in. And you've got to just sit and listen and come back around in a few weeks. And you're going to hear about all the other skills and tools you can use.
Yeah, great answer. And I was thinking the same thing, that it's, it feels like, yeah, but I didn't do this, it's, I hear this often from both sides, like porn addiction. Well, I didn't act out, in person with anybody. And so betrayed partners that go, what, like I shouldn't feel as betrayed as as someone who's acted out, sexually in person. And I'm like, but it's still a betrayal. It's a fracture of the relationship, all of those things. And so on some level, it's like, well, I only drink beer. I didn't drink whiskey. It's still a problem, so like what you did, the behaviors are, I often say it's a maladaptive coping mechanism, whatever that is, that's a symptom. The fracture is the relationship. I do think, and I hate when I hear, oops, sorry, from partners or the addict that it was, the betrayal was with a friend, a relative or something. When there's that, I mean, like then it's the double betrayal, and so then I think that's like just the of it. But at the end of the day, you talk about the spectrum, Debbie, but I'm like, it doesn't matter if you're on the low end of the spectrum or the high end of the spectrum, it's betrayal trauma. It still has fractured the relationship. It's still a problem. And so accepting that this has hurt her deeply, and I do think, like you said, the emotional is, and this is not justification. Don't go running off to Vegas and have transactional sex. It's, but transactional sex, it's less connected, and so that can be a bit less painful, but nobody comes here and listens to this and spends their Friday afternoon with us if they're not in a place of hurt and pain. So at some point we're in pain, and how do we move forward? And looking for justifications of like, well, she shouldn't feel that bad, isn't going to serve you or her. So I'm really glad you're here. I'm so glad you're here and
Thank you for
willing to
sharing.
ask the question.
That was
Yeah,
hard.
yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing too, just one last little thing, and that is, sometimes with the betrayed partner, I also look at, what's happened to them previously in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it takes them to a deeper place because they may have family of origin things that are going on that rub up against this, or very similar past relationships. And so there's a lot of layers to this. And I wish it was an easy answer, but I'm glad that the question was asked and that you were vulnerable. And sure.
Yeah, me too. Okay, next question. How long does the crisis phase last? Also, my partner is 45 days since disclosure. He's doing 3 support groups, 12-step groups, and individual therapy. He's tapping into his emotions, but struggling. What is my role as a betrayed partner in helping him feel he's really struggling?
Okay, let's start with the crisis phase. How long does it last? Typically, it'll last anywhere from, sometimes I say 2 months up to a year. So a lot of that crisis phase actually depends on what the betrayed partner is willing to do to get out of crisis. That's really unfortunate. You are 45 days into it with disclosure. You are smack dab in the middle of that crisis phase. And so what you've got to work on at this point is kind of recognizing that your addict partner is having those feelings and emotions, and you're going to let them feel those feelings and emotions. Because oftentimes in those early days, as a betrayed partner, when I see my addict partner struggling, I want to step in and help them manage their emotions. Now, remember, part of the reason we have addiction is because we don't know how to manage our emotions. And that's one of the things that you have to learn how to do. And that's done through going to your support groups, like it sounds like he's doing, going into an individual therapist who understands addiction and that type of addiction, so that they can work through those feelings in groups and with their therapists. So then that allows you to be there and allow them to share emotions, but you don't have to do anything with it. But in order to do that, you have to take care of yourself. So in that crisis phase, your focus is going to be on stabilization, emotional regulation. That's the first thing I hit with my clients. And that is 3 things in 3 areas you're going to start focusing on. The first area is you're going to start working on mindfulness. I want to calm your mind down because you've just had disclosure 45 days ago. And so you've got thoughts all over the place. I call it monkey mind. And you've got conversations and you're all over the place and intrusive thoughts. And you're thinking about the past, you're projecting into the future. And we've got to get you back in your body into the here and now. So research shows 15 to 20 minutes a day of intentional mindful practice. So that would be guided imagery. That would be going and finding some breath work to do and breathing along. I find if you've got a lot of monkey mind chatter going on, then you typically need to do some mindfulness where you're being directed, meaning somebody is talking you through. The other part of that is healthy human connection, which means you as a betrayed partner cannot isolate. You've got to find those people that are healthy. So when you have a trigger and you're struggling with your own emotion, you've got somebody you can connect and reach out to. There's so many resources out there as well. So for you, it's going to be, do I need to get a therapist? Because I would highly suggest you get your own, really qualified, sex addiction therapist, betrayal trauma therapist who understands that. I'm partial because I'm a CSAT to that type of a therapist. So you have support because you're going to have lots of big emotions as well. So have people you can reach out to, get into a group yourself. So you have people you can turn to for that. Again, the research shows that the quickest way to increase our window of tolerance is to connect with another human being because we are wired for connection. Thirdly, you've got to start focusing on your own self-care and create balance that way. So for my clients, it's dailies, 4 areas. You've got to do 2 things in each of these 4 areas. 2 things to support your physical body, 2 things to support that spiritual part of you, 2 things to kind of do self-care, emotional support. So what do I need? In this moment, I need to take a nap, go to lunch with friends, do less housework today. I'm taking care of me emotionally. And then lastly, relationally, I've got to stay connected relationally. So it sounds really simple, but it is so necessary. And those betrayed partners who in those early days in the crisis phase start doing that, really regulate quickly, especially if you're in a group, especially if you're seeing a therapist, and then you're doing all these things between all of that. And I can see regulation happen, even in a month. I've seen it. I do find that, those that struggle, I typically will ask them, okay, so how are your dailies going? How are those 3 pillars? The 3 pillars you need to be focusing on, how's it going? They will always tell me that they've slacked off or they're not doing it. There's just not enough time. I'm too busy with the kids. I've got too much going on. And I always tell them, put your oxygen mask on first, and then you will have more energy and ability to help everybody else and do everything else. So I hope that answered. So your role as a betrayed partner in helping him feel is to allow him to feel, let him have his own emotions. Don't feel like you can fix his emotions or help him process emotions. Just have empathy and acknowledge, it seems like you're really sad right now. I imagine that's really hard. If I were in your shoes, I would feel sad too. Or I've had a similar experience, and I felt really angry about that as well. So it's really hard, isn't it? So just support them that way. Come up with some empathetic statements that you can use, and then they will feel, your addict partner will feel supported.
Yeah, and honestly, you support you. You like it's not your job to take care of him right now. He needs to lean into his support. He's got good support. You said he's doing support groups and 12-step. Great. Hopefully, he's got a sponsor. That's his support, and that's his safe place. And you taking care of you being able to go, gosh, I'm betrayed, I'm hurt, what do you need to do to take care of you? Like Debbie said, put your oxygen mask on first. He needs to learn to do that. Couples that try to be the sole support for each other, that gets really complicated, and I think it takes a lot longer to really get to the other side. So you leaning each into the support for you. I did include, because in the chat, there's the Sex Addiction 101 work group that starts again June 24th. We had the Betrayed Partner work group that started June 14th. We've already added a few people, to that work group, but we'll have another one that starts, towards the end of August. So those are solid places for the 2 of you to get content and support and education that will really help you both on this path. So, but I really encourage you to focus on you and not on him. He needs to do the work for him. So
Yeah, and if you were my client, one of the things I would say to you is I totally understand why you feel like you want to help that way, right?
yeah.
Part of the safety seeking that we do as betrayed partners I want to make sure that my addict partner is going to be okay, right? I'm seeing him or her struggle. I love them. I care about them. Their recovery is really crucial for me. And so we do want to step in as betrayed partners to try to help them along in their recovery. The hardest thing you do as a betrayed partner is to step back and let them figure it out. It is hard. So I don't want to minimize, what
Right.
you're going through, and I want to acknowledge that it's normal and that for you it's going to be hard at first to focus on you, but I know you can do it.
So the next question, my PA had a relapse and kept saying he felt shame during the relapse. Now he has been sober for 6 months. He is not feeling shame. Going forward, I will look for the word shame and think relapse. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I've heard that before. My brain would automatically connect the two. I'm going to tell you. I would, if you can, again, I've got to be that compassionate observer. And if he's in his shame, I've got to step back and not, automatically judge that there's been a relapse. There could have been. I'm not saying that there hasn't. So for you, it might be that when you do see his shame coming up, that would be a great time for you guys to be doing check-ins. I would actually do check-ins regularly, and I think I would put shame in there. What's your level of shame, 1 to 5, right? What's your shame struggle been around? You can both share that. It doesn't have to just be the addict partner. And that might be one way to kind of help you feel a little more comfortable and secure as to where your partner's at with their shame. But I do see that when the addicts do have a relapse and they have a slip, that their behavior does change. So I get it that a betrayed partner is really in tune and watching, how their addict partner's behaving. So you're seeing shame come up, which I'm assuming looks like more defensiveness, maybe even irritability, anger. They might act like they're uncaring and feeling, because remember, shame shows up as kind of a fight, flight, freeze pattern, right? I go into fight, so I get angry. I go into flight, meaning they're getting away, they're pulling away from you, or they're freezing, they're shutting down. And so for you, automatically your brain's going to go, oh, they've had a relapse. I just know it. And your intuition, if it's now back, in action, which it takes a while in recovery for that betrayed partner to really tune in and believe their intuition, you could be dead on. However, before you come to that conclusion, figure out a format, a way that you can go to your partner, have an agreement that if there is a slip, they've got 12 hours. They need to come and meet with you, let you know. Maybe they need to put together their relapse prevention sheet, whatever that looks like, so that they come and share with you what led up to the slip, right? What was their thinking, their shame-based thinking on that, and then what are they going to do moving forward so that they don't have another relapse. So that's another way to kind of repair that. So I'm hoping that's helpful, but I would come up with some systems, come up with some ways to manage it together, right? Work as a team on this. And again, you want to do it kind of be more that compassionate observer. Stay out of judgment and just there, you're there to support.
I was thinking too, like shame. I love Troy Love's work, no pun intended, but because it can be the politician, it can be the judge, it can be the rebel, it can be the impotent one. There's different ways it shows up. So, so if you're looking, maybe there's one way that showed up when when he had a relapse, but looking for all of those and see if there's some nuances of that. And Troy does Friday mornings with the guys, but also every other Thursdays with betrayed partners. So you both can get some more information on that. And he has a work group. I did put the work groups in the chat, so check that out as well. But that might be useful for you to consider as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the next one, and this is a great question too. We have been on this journey for 24 years, always in recovery with several relapses. I find it difficult to hear my PA tell me he is struggling.
Absolutely. I get that. And so that means you're not in a place, and you don't have to be their support person on that. And so my recommendation is to the betrayed partners is to support them by saying, how are you going to manage the struggle? What's your plan? Who are you turning to? Are you open to suggestions? You need to reach out to your group. You need to get a sponsor. you need to get in to see your therapist more regularly, because we have to get to a point as the betrayed partner that it is not, we don't have to do anything about their struggling. For you, though, it's that up and down and up and down and up and down. So if you've got a therapist, I think I would go in and work on some boundary stuff with my therapist to figure out, okay, what boundaries can I put into place around when my partner's struggling? Maybe there's some internal boundaries you can put in place for yourself, things that, you know, you're going to not do or you will do if your partner's struggling, as well as some external boundaries on them. And this one, there's a lot of different ways we can go on this. So that might be a great topic for the future, right? When my partner's struggling again and again and again, how do I, as a betrayed partner, manage that, especially when it's for so long? So I just want to, tell you that I totally understand where you're at. If I were in your shoes, I would feel kind of crazy. I would feel like it's never going to get better. I would feel discouraged, and I would probably hate to see my partner struggling, because it would mean that we're back in that again. So again, reach out, get support, take care of you.
Yeah. And I was thinking, because if the struggle, I mean, the work that we do is the deeper work. It's the inner child. It's the attachment wounds. It's all of those things. So I'll mention again the work groups, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but, we have inner child, we have attachment, why men struggle to love, healthy intimacy. All of those are that deeper work that helps address those struggles. Now, first has to be recovery, we have lots of guys that go, oh, I want to go do healthy intimacy and sex, but they're still acting out. So that isn't the right fit. And email me if you have questions, but to me, that would be, like Debbie said, what do you need to do to shore up your program? Cause it's your program, and then you as a betrayed partner take care of you. But that would be a good topic. So
yeah. And
consider that one.
The fact is, if you've got an addict who's struggling 24 years and still relapsing, they haven't gotten deep enough in their work. That's just the reality of it. And sometimes the betrayed partner has to really accept that reality and then figure out what they're going to do with it. So
abstinence is just not doing the problematic behaviors. Recovery is living different, and it shouldn't be struggling with, wanting to act out. I mean, there's struggles of life, but, it's different. So, okay, the next one is, I'm struggling in having empathy for someone who disclosed they were a sex addict with so many people. You say it's just sex. That's not what we said. I don't say it's just sex or just porn or whatever. So like, all of this is problematic. The quantity of encounters is so overwhelming. We are in the initial phase of disclosure, but sometimes I get stuck on the quantity. And like having empathy, the empathy is like, you're very early in this process. So
not your job to have empathy yet. So give yourself permission to not go to that place yet, because this is big. You're in the initial phase of disclosure. Hopefully you're doing that, in that therapeutic formal disclosure form, so you have support. My recommendation is work on you, because you're going to have to figure out how to come to terms with the fact that there was so much acting out. There were so many partners. It is overwhelming, and it is not just sex. It is very, very complicated. And for each person, it kind of brings up different things for them that they have to face as a betrayed partner and look at and see if they can live with it. That's part of your healing. And you're doing that at the same time while you're doing all your recovery, using all your recovery skills and tools. So I would say at this point, focus on that stabilization for you. Focus on taking care of you, getting your support. We want you to get to a place where you're starting to feel more grounded, you're feeling more stable, and we can put empathy on the back burner for now, and then get in and get some help, if you aren't already, with somebody to kind of work through that aspect of there being so many people, right? And coming to terms with, how am I going to manage this? How am I going to process through this?
and I'm have empathy for yourself. Like, this is incredibly painful stuff, and what a level of brokenness for that sex addict, that there's that much. I mean, this wasn't just a one-time fling, and I'm not minimizing that, don't get me wrong, but it is very different, and there is a spectrum, and but it doesn't change, I mean, maybe a little bit the levels of pain, for partners or whatever. It's still painful. It's still betrayal trauma. I have to say this, please make sure you've had an STD test. Take care of you in all of this, because, and don't say, I've had partners that have said, "Oh, he says he doesn't have an STD." I don't care what he says. He's lying about everything. So why would that? So please please take care of you, and do what you need to do to take care of your physical health as well. But you are so early in the process, so please lean into the resources. And yeah, Dr. Rob says all the time, and I wasn't going to say this, but he says, your job as a betrayed partner for the first year is to take care of you, and it's okay to be angry at the addict, and angry at the behaviors and all of the hurt, but not minimizing the pain that is there, but also doing what you need to do to take care of yourself through all of that too.
And
So
you've got to work through all your losses and your grief in order to get to that place of empathy as well, oftentimes.
okay, so we have one more question, so we're going to finish this one up. So I'm the betrayed. I love my job so much and I don't want to give it up, but 2 years past D-Day and the former affair partner continues to come into my business once a week or so as a customer. I have to wait on her. I keep my head held high and stay professional but cold. However, every time I have to see her, I'm reminded of his affairs. Is it possible to still heal with having to see her? Oh, that is painful. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's a hard one. Wow. First of all, I want to say I'm very, very impressed that you keep your head held high and that you've done this repeatedly. That I think that is a very difficult situation, and I would have a struggle with it. That would be very painful, like you said. Um, is it possible to heal? I do believe it is. Will it be easy? It's not easy. I am wondering, and I don't know the details of your job, but are there some boundaries that can be put into place? Do you have to be the one that waits on her? Are there other people there that could step
Yeah.
in so you can create some physical space? Because I'm not sure what you do for work. And so I would love to kind of even circle back around to this one again, because this is a hard one, a really, really hard one. To have to be back around by the affair partner repeatedly, it's taking you back into your trauma again and again and again. And so, depending on where you're at in your recovery journey with your addict partner, that's a factor as well. I would get in. You might want to do even some EMDR on this.
Good idea.
I do accelerated resolution therapy. That's a offshoot from EMDR. I do both, actually. Something like that might help so that you're not going back into your trauma every time she comes in. That would be really, really hard to do. So there's just so many layers to this. So I want to think on this one as well. But I just want to circle back around and say that I'm just impressed that you're able to do that. And I know that it makes recovery really, really hard when you're constantly reminded of the affairs.
Yeah, and I appreciate, I mean, I love my job and there's this, and, that's incredibly painful, and, and really like audacious of the affair partner to come waltzing into, like, I just, that takes some, it just kind of stuns me that, that person's willing to, keep doing that. So maybe I just had this thought, and I don't know if this will help, and, always take what you need, leave the rest, but, think about what a broken person she is, that she's willing to act like this, and try to, so maybe it's a shift of like, wow, that person is so incredibly broken, and how grateful I am I'm not her. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah.
obviously poor boundaries. So when somebody else has poor boundaries, are there some boundaries I can put into place? So my thoughts are, can I go to, my boss, or to go to, my supervisor and say, there's a situation that was here. I just can't wait on this client. What can
Mhm,
we do about
mhm,
it?
mhm,
Right?
mhm. Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
even know if you can speak up and ask her not to come back, because that could jeopardize your job. But man,
yeah,
I kind of brainstorm,
yeah.
some healthy boundaries on that one.
But I am so grateful for you holding your head up high and handling yourself professionally. Like, honestly, good for you for that. And hopefully you've got support around every couple of weeks when when that person shows up, so that you've got the, yep, she did it again, and but you've got a place to vent. So
And an indicator of how much work you've done.
yes,
Very
yes,
much
great.
so.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thank you, Debbie. We'll wait
You're
to
welcome.
hear about empathy builders next time. So join us, come back, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. Thanks, Debbie. Bye,
Bye, everybody.
everybody.